Folks, thank you so much for tuning in at the start of the week. Sorry for a little bit of delay, but we were waiting. I was just hanging on for an announcement that did come as we had predicted. And you want to stay tuned for this and other things. But the biggest electric announcement, electrical investment in the history of North America. You want to tune in for that. I'm going to tell you about it right away. And then we'll follow up and do a little thing on a big story cruising around Washington. Where's Melania? Where's the First Lady? Uh, President Trump saying something very threatening to South Korea. And how does a 16-year-old girl go from 0 hits on TikTok to millions overnight? We're going to get it all right here. So the first thing I want to talk about is, as we had thought and predicted, Prime Minister Carney just had a meeting, a huge announcement with the Premier of Newfoundland and also the present Premier of province of Quebec, and it has to do with clean energy subsidies. And it's talking about, people are already saying it's the largest announcement of its type for electric energy in the history of North America. It's huge, and it's grabbing everybody's attention quite rightly. It has to do with power sources in Newfoundland and Labrador and what that means to Quebec. So those of you who've been around for a little while will know and remember the famous Churchill Falls Power Hydroelectric Agreement between Newfoundland, Labrador, and Quebec. It's really been seen and gone down in history. Some people are calling the biggest ripoff ever in Canadian history. And Newfoundland and Labrador robbed of its own energy sources, as some people say, and people in Quebec say, tough, that's what we signed for, and that's just the way it is. But that deal was signed way back in 1969, and Newfoundland and Labrador didn't have much in the way of money to invest. They didn't have access to the main power corridors to the U.S. the way the province of Quebec did. And I mean, the guys who and the women who negotiated that deal should, as far as province of Quebec goes, they should all get, heroes mentioned forever. Way back in 1969, so Quebecers have been enjoying a fraction of what other people have been paying for power rates. And the deal is now actually the deal was so bad that twice the government of Newfoundland and Labrador took it to the Supreme Court of Canada. Supreme Court Canada actually quite rightly said, no, you signed the deal. Everything was talked about beforehand and you can't get out of it. And so what is being talked about and what has just been announced now is gigantic investment going to be going into principally into Newfoundland and Labrador. There's this large investment. You're going to see increasing the size of the Churchill Falls hydroelectric power project. Another one starting nearby, and 2,000 megawatts of wind power. Wind power, controversial. A lot of people are saying it's not worth the investment, but this is a huge investment now going. All three of these sources of investment going into, as I said, Churchill Falls itself, another electric plant nearby, and the huge investment into 2,000 megawatts of wind power. Enough in those three projects to give all the power to all the homes in Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal combined. And it's actually show you the length of the power, the amount of power it will put out. This is all in the announcements. I'm not excited about it. I'm just telling you this is the announcement. The Bruce nuclear reactor in Bruce Power in Ontario. It's the largest nuclear plant in terms of delivering power in all of North America. This investment, according to the feds and the provincial governments, will double the power that's coming out of the Bruce Power nuclear plant. Now, there's a couple of other things that are coming. I pointed out to you last week there was an election going to be called in the province of Quebec for early October. And we know that in October, on the 19th of October, there's also going to be a number of referendum questions being asked of citizens in Alberta. And one of those questions will have to do with independence or Alberta seceding. Along those lines, it's not an up and down vote. It's just a question about whether people want to pursue it. So the timing is very interesting because in Quebec right now, as far as the provincial election goes, The separatist provincial party, the Péquistes, they are ahead in the polls. And trailing them is the Liberal Party. And I've been saying, wow, now with this announcement coming up in October, just watch I said, the procession of ministers who will be going into, this is federal Liberal ministers going into the province of Quebec to announce things, to effectively buy votes in that provincial election for the provincial Liberal Party. I'm going to admit right here, I had no idea that in the announcement today was going to be anything like of the magnitude it has been. I thought you'd hear some projects announced. I'll tell you what, this shows how panicked and desperate the federal Liberals are. This is a gigantic investment. And obviously, when something like this is announced, the underlying bribe that is sort of not really said, but kind of implied to taxpayers is, well, you know, if we don't win that election in Quebec, it might throw the whole thing off. It's just, to me, I'm leaving out the electric part of it. I'm leaving out the horrendous and the terrific, fabulous, but horrendous amount of investment that's going to go in from the federal government, huge subsidies for this in the federal government just to win an election. And my prediction is watch how this goes. People in Alberta, especially those who want to see Alberta go independent, they are going to be touting this right now even before this podcast is over. You check the news later on tonight or tomorrow, they're going to be saying, you see what Quebec does? Every time they sound like they maybe could go independent or not vote for the Liberals, they wind up getting buckets full, carloads full, train loads full of cash going into their province. It's certainly happening again. It's going to be interesting to predict, but a lot of people are going to be upset in Alberta. A lot of people saying this is the type of bribery that the very reason that we want to get Alberta out of Canada. We're going to see where it goes. But folks, just getting started and really going crazy. Well, there's a group called Just Facts, and they are a widely known group, and they research things just to get the facts. They're all about fact checking. They've got a report out today. It's the biggest survey to date. They surveyed ChatGPT, Claude, and Grok, and also Gemini. And they used AI actually to do intensive fact checking on a variety of stories and searches from those three giant AI companies to see how accurate those companies were in their own fact checking when somebody asks for information. And in terms of inaccuracy, lack of credibility when it comes to checking on facts, it was found that ChatGPT had the worst record. 57% of searches that people do, they ask for information and Chat does the search, suggest erroneous information or not factual. Gemini was next with 49% of facts that were dubious. Claude was next at 44%, and Grok at 32%. So it says Grok had the best record in terms of factuality. Now, I can tell you, all of these companies are going to be furiously digging to see if somehow Grok, in fact, financed this study. We don't know if they did, but just to raise the issue, folks, when you are getting information from these particular organizations, it may be factual, it may not. And the first three for sure, Chat, Gemini, and Claude, in that order, all of their information coming back cranks significantly to the left side of the equation. So people are being hugely influenced, as always in mainstream media, by the left. So anyway, I'll let you decide what you want to do and where you want to keep doing your searching. There's a ceasefire that is expiring today. It expires today. This is a ceasefire which hasn't really been ceasefire, but anyway, between the U.S. and Iran expires today. And President Trump has been very clear, saying he wants a guarantee, absolutely, of no ongoing nuclear development out of Iran. He wants the Strait of Hormuz open. everybody is sitting around saying, well, it's just going to be another one of these red lines that never gets really crossed. But officially at the end of day today, the ceasefire is supposedly over, and people are saying all Hades could break loose. And in this particular situation, some interesting developments because President Trump, every year there's annual military and naval and Air Force exercises, joint exercises between South Korea and the United States military, and it happens over, in, on, and around South Korea. And it's done as a show of strength and a reminder to China that the US will be there for South Korea if anything happens, for instance, an attack on Taiwan. And at one point, just a few days ago, President Trump was saying he was going to cancel this military exercise. South Korea and their allies so concerned about what that would look like and the incentive to China, they raised concerns. And so what President Trump has done, he has reduced the activity considerably. He's completely scaled back. The exercises will go ahead between the military joint operations between the United States and South Korea, but drastically reduced. And he's saying he's doing that because he wanted a number of countries, including South Korea, to join in putting pressure on Iran to eliminate their nuclear capacity and also to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. South Korea did not get into that, did not join the US in that concern. Other countries did. And President Trump being pretty clear, saying you wouldn't help us in terms of taking out Iran and in terms of stopping their nuclear program, so we're backing off. These could be huge implications, huge repercussions. We will see what happens. Well, when different policies change in terms of taxes, and we continue to report on this, tax policy and the amount of government subsidization that a province or a state or a country gets into, and high costs of government services, that all leads to high costs of living and high costs of doing business. And people and business will move. They will leave your state or your province or your country if they can find areas where they are treated more respectfully by the tax departments. So the California company called Digital Brands Group, its CEO, his name is Hill Davis, talking about their move to Texas. And with that move, when they are there, they'll be setting up shop not far from Austin, Texas, building just the one factory. It's a clothing and apparel business that they were building. You can't even fit inside a football stadium. It's over 1.5 football fields long, thousands and thousands of jobs, and they are out of California, and they have gone to Texas, and just another sign that people will leave if governments don't treat them and their hard-earned taxes and hard-earned earnings respectfully. Times Square, did I mention this to you? They got a bit of reporting about a week ago. Huge billboard gone up in Times Square, New York City, and it's saying Mayor Mondani, they're giving him the award for the year for economic development, but not in New York. It's put up by a Florida-based group, and they are giving Mondani, the mayor of New York City, the arch socialist, the Economic Development Award of the Year because Mondani's policies have sent so many people to Florida, so much investment to Florida. Florida is rejoicing. New York is going to suffer. Folks, left-leaning socialist policies don't work. It hurts individuals. They hurt workers. They cause job loss. They hurt economies. And it's just playing out in real life. Well, if you have been making a ton of money and you want to buy Ferrari's first ever EV, an electric vehicle made by Ferrari, it's going to cost you, I guess, 40 million bucks. That's what the first one just went for at the Monterey car auction just a couple of days ago. So if you're looking for that kind of stuff, that's what's going to cost you to go rolling around in your new Ferrari. NBC is reporting that the First Lady, Melania Trump, has only done half as many appointments, public appearances, as she did at this same point in her first term in office. Now, before people start to jump to wild conclusions, I think if you look at the very packed schedules of any of the first ladies, it always eased off somewhat in the second term because, in fact, the president can't get elected more than twice. That's by virtue of the Constitution. It's a very good rule in the U.S. So I'm saying that is part of the rule or part of the reason for that. We'll see what goes on with that. A lot of rumors circulating around as to why she's not around, though. So we'll continue to watch that. There's an organization called DY News, and they're talking about the fact that Brandon Weichart, who indeed, and I've researched him, is seen as an expert when it comes to security issues, national security, international security, reports a lot on activities in the armed forces. And he is saying the morale in the U.S., some of the armed forces, especially those folks who are deployed over there in Iran, and especially on the aircraft carriers, morale is way down. And that is affecting not just the morale there, but affecting supporters of the Republican Party in general who are hearing these stories about sailors and soldiers getting not very good food, not very good breaks away from the action, not being treated well. I'll tell you, whether that's true or not, they better address it. Even the thought of it, you will lose votes if people do not think you as a government are supporting the military with the respect they feel they have. Wired magazine is talking about the effect of some of these betting apps like Kalshi and Polymarket on elections, because people are sort of the way these so-called predictor markets or betting markets go, whether it's Kalshi or Polymarket or others, is people watch who's betting what, and they sort of think that anybody putting big bets on things must know something and must be kind of smart. So then they start to follow what the bettors are doing. And this is being proven to be wrong in more and more elections. People are betting on elections. You can bet on anything with these Kalshi markets and Polymarket. And in the Wisconsin primary, remember last week, it was a bit of a surprise. Even I was thinking that the person running for the primary nomination for the Democrats in Wisconsin in the race for governor was Francesca Hong, a true, look, I'm trying to be polite, but a true left-wing fanatic lunatic. Looked like she was going to win, and a lot of the polls were being predicated on how the betting apps, how people who bet, because when you bet on something like a horse race before the race even starts, you can find out what the odds are and who's betting where. And it seemed that the betting odds were going in favor of Francesca Hong. Didn't work out that way, and the polls were affected by how people were doing their betting on the betting apps. And so it's become such a concern. Now, not only is that a concern, but people, what insider betting is, like on a basketball game, let's say, if you know that one person is injured, for instance, one of the top players, or maybe one of the players isn't going to play just quite as hard as they should, you can bet accordingly and make a ton of money if you have insider information. And people are so worried about how the poll workers, this is the people who count the polls, count the ballots, are being affected by these apps which predict an election, that in a couple of counties now in the U.S., and I think this is going to spread, poll workers, people who work in the polls, have to take an oath that they will not bet on the election because of ways that the concern is out there is that they can affect the election. Or let's say if you were predicting a certain person was going to win in one constituency, let's say with you were going to predict they were going to win by 1,000 votes, and then all of a sudden you see with all the votes coming in that you're going to lose that bet. You might just be tempted to get rid of some of those polls or hide them. Anyway, it's becoming a huge problem, and some counties now, and I do think you're going to see this spread, volunteer or paid poll workers having to sign something, swear an oath that they will not bet on that particular election. Well, I'll tell you what, Burger King was betting on their chef in terms of being able, and we talked about this a little while ago too, their chief chef, Amy Alarcon, they were betting that Chef Amy was going to be able to really upgrade the Burger King's Whopper burger, and they did that. So we got the results are coming in now. These results are sustained, so it's not just the uptick that would come after you do a big advertising campaign. But what the chef did was recommended you get a bigger bun, not smaller, more mayo, not less. How about put it in a box to keep it nice and fresh and warm? And it's all paid off, and it's the big burger has pulled ahead of anything like it at Max or at McDonald's or at Wendy's. And it's if you want to bet on a company or something going ahead, I'm sure some people were watching and were aware that the head chef at Burger King, Amy Alarcon, had been the head chef in 2019 over at Popeyes fast food and had developed and invented a new chicken sandwich at Popeyes, which absolutely swept the nation and resulted in huge increases for Popeyes. So follow those chefs. Some of them seem to know what they're doing. In terms of chefs, what about where's the beef? More and more Canadians are realizing, and there's more and more reports, that beef from Australia is coming into Canada and available on the shelves at about half the price as Canadian beef. Matter of fact, just this weekend, my wife grabbed some steaks, and they were from Australia, and they quite literally, they were delicious. They were quite literally half the price of Canadian beef. So a couple of things going into the factors there. First of all, over the last few years, there's been a slow downside among the big beef farmers in the size of their herds. Now, why were they downsizing? Well, one of the reasons is being speculated for about the last 10 or 15 years. There's been so much in the media, mainly leftist media, but so much in the media about the dangers of eating meat, the dangers of eating beef, and how, to raise cattle, it takes up so much time and space to grow the grain and the crops, and it was all seen as anti-environmentalist. And then the fact that you're eating meat, and farmers actually began to reduce the size of their herds over the last few years. Now, when you reduce the size of your herd, it takes a long time to rebuild that herd. That, in fact, has been what's been happening. Herd reduction in Canada, and meanwhile in Australia and in New Zealand, where the government does very little subsidy for the agriculture industry, very little subsidy. Those farmers and those supply chains have come up with ways of making excellent product, and without a government subsidy, they have to learn how to be competitive and how to improve their whole processing business, and they have done that. So another example of when government gets involved, the price of the object always go up. In Australia and New Zealand, government pulled out of the big subsidy programs. I can remember when I was Minister of Trade, first time I met the New Zealand Minister of Trade, and I hardly had my hand out to say hello, because we've got subsidies in Canada, farm related subsidies in Canada that are a sore point for all of our neighbors. And he said, as long as you've got your supply side program in place, you won't be getting any deals from New Zealand. Then he finished it off by saying, over my dead body. So Canada, with its subsidy programs, and also by continuing to subsidy and really develop product at unfair rates, it makes it more difficult for us to trade. So once again, an example of the more government involvement in something, the higher the costs are going to be. And you're going to see more and more Canadians buying Canadian beef until the Canadian herds get back up to size. And that's just the way it goes, folks. Keep that in mind. If government subsidize something, the cost will eventually go up. And that'll happen in this situation as well. And as in others, we're still engulfed in smoke out here in the Okanagan, in the middle of British Columbia, but it's around the world. And I've been talking about the fact that the majority of fires around the world are not started by, quote, climate change, whatever that is. The majority are human started, and the huge percentage of those human started ones are arsonists. In Greece, with fires that broke out just east of Athens in a place called Speta. a person arrested there. But this isn't a one-off. In Greece alone, since January 1st, there have been 302 separate arrests around the country of people starting these fires. I've been reporting on the people in Canada who've been starting these fires. This is a problem, folks. I've said before, unless the government shows that people are going to go to jail for a very, very long time, this problem is going to increase. Some of the people lighting these fires may be politically motivated, or they just may be crazy, as we say, using the word crazy. But folks, unless we get a clear message out there that we're going to clamp down and clamp down hard on this, these forest fires are going to continue. Well, here's a TikToker by the name of Ellie Ellis. Now, 1 week ago, I'm saying 1 week ago, she had 6 followers. She now has 700,000 1 week later. And her views, every time she posts something, go into the millions. And how did she do that? What is with that? How did she become an overnight sensation? Really, all she did was she posted on TikTok, posted a caption that says, "Please don't bully me. Thank you. Please don't bully me. Thank you." It went off the charts. Its first time out got 15 million views, and whereas she had a total of six followers. This isn't just people who view 6 followers. She's last week. She's now at 700,000. Of course, when you're an influencer, it doesn't take long for the marketplace to respond 5 days after her first post, 5 days after, and she was instantly seen as an influencer. A beauty brand known as Too Faced, and that's two spelled Too, got a hold of her. Now, that particular brand would get about, in terms of viewers, it would get in a month, it might get 5,000, 3.5 million now that they signed her for their product. Too Faced gets 3.5 million views as opposed to a maximum on a good month, maybe 5,000. So there you go, folks. Into the world of faith and entertainment. Some of you will be familiar with the Twilight series, very well known among Gen Z and millennials, a little too scary for me. But one of the key actors there, Keelan Lutz, and he plays the part of Emmett Cullen in Twilight, just did an interview. Why did he move out of California? So it's not just businesses that move, people move. And he said so that he and his wife can move into communities that have more church accessibility, are more faith oriented, are not as crazy as what goes on in California. So it seems like your fiscal policies will attract people, but also the spiritual policies. And don't ever let government start setting spiritual based policies. Let the people decide. Folks, thanks for tuning in. See you tomorrow.